Apache woman traded tribe's treasure for cowboy's freedom, then asked him to treasure her instead. Apache woman traded tribe's treasure for cowboy's freedom, then asked him to treasure her instead. Part 1. The rope had already been tied around his wrists when Kaya first saw him. He was not dead yet. That was the only reason she slowed her horse. The man was on his knees in the red dust, surrounded by 4 of her uncle's warriors, his hat knocked somewhere in the dirt behind him, his face streaked with dried blood from a cut above his left eye. He was not begging. That was the second reason she stopped. Most men begged. This one stared straight ahead at the canyon wall like he was memorizing it, like he had already decided something. His jaw was set. His shoulders did not shake. He was maybe 30 years old, broad through the chest, with the kind of hands that had worked every season of his life. His shirt was torn at the collar. One boot had lost its heel. None of it seemed to embarrass him. Kaya pulled her horse to a stop at the ridge and watched from a distance. Her uncle, Chief Naughton, stood apart from the others with his arms crossed. He was not an unreasonable man, but he was a proud one. And this cowboy had been found on the sacred grazing land 3 days running, each time with the same roan horse and the same burlap sacks loaded with something her uncle's men could not identify. They had decided he was a scout. A spy sent ahead of the land surveyors who kept crawling across Apache territory like ants following a sugar trail. Kaya had heard the arguing in the camp that morning. She had heard her uncle's voice rise and fall. She had heard the word they used for men who were made an example of. She did not agree with what was coming. She rode down. The warriors turned when they heard her horse. Her uncle looked up. His expression moved through surprise, irritation, and finally a kind of careful stillness that meant he was listening but not yet willing to show it. "What is he accused of?" she asked in their language, not looking at the cowboy. "Trespassing on sacred land 3 times. He is either stupid or he is scouting." Her uncle's voice was flat. "Did anyone ask him why he came? He does not speak our language." "I do," Kaya said, her uncle's eyes narrowed. "You are not here to defend a stranger." "I am here because I rode past and saw a man on his knees who has not been given the chance to speak." She kept her voice even. She had learned a long time ago that raising her voice in counsel or in argument only gave people a reason to stop listening. "Let me speak to him. If his reason is worth nothing, I will ride away." Her uncle was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Kaya swung down from her horse. She walked toward the cowboy and crouched in front of him so they were eye level. His eyes moved to her face. They were gray, a color she had not expected. There was pain in them, but underneath the pain there was something sharp and clear. "I speak English," she said. "You are going to answer my questions honestly. If you lie, I will know and I will not help you. Do you understand?" He blinked. "Yes, ma'am." "Why were you on this land 3 days in a row?" He held her gaze. "My younger brother crossed onto it the week before last. He is 14. He got turned around in the canyon system and his horse came back without him. I have been looking for him." Kaya did not move. "Alone? I did not want to bring a group of men onto land that was not mine to bring them onto. I thought 1 man was less of an insult than 10. She studied his face. The cut above his eye was not fresh enough to be from today. It was from a fall maybe 2 days ago. His boots were worn through in a pattern that meant he had been walking alongside his horse, not riding. A man searching on foot through rough terrain. "What is your brother's name?" "Eli. He has red hair, freckles. He is thin for his age." Kaya stood up. She turned to her uncle and spoke in their language. "He has been looking for a lost child, a boy of 14. He came alone so as not to bring trouble." She paused. "He has been respectful in the only way he knew how." Her uncle said nothing for a moment. "You believe him?" "I believe his boots," she said. Her uncle looked at the cowboy's ruined footwear. Something shifted in his expression. He was a man who understood the evidence of hard walking. "Release him," her uncle said. The warriors cut the rope. The cowboy rolled his wrists and stood slowly. He did not run. He did not even step backward. He looked at Kaya with an expression she could not immediately name. It was not relief exactly. It was something quieter. "Thank you," he said. "Do not thank me yet," she said. "Tell me which canyon you searched last." He told her. She knew that system well. She knew every branching path of it, every dry creek bed, every shallow cave where animals sheltered from the afternoon heat. She knew where a boy who was lost and frightened and had been out in the cold for over a week might have gone. "Your brother may still be alive," she said. "There is a place in the East Canyon where the walls hold warmth and there is a spring." If he had enough sense to stop moving and stay in one place, he may be there. The cowboy's jaw worked. For the first time, the composure cracked slightly at the edges. "Will you take me?" She looked at him for a long moment. His name, she would later learn, was Cole Briggs. He was from a cattle ranch 2 days' ride south. He had a mother who was still living, a father who was not, and a younger brother named Eli who had red hair and freckles and a habit of following butterflies off trails. She did not know any of that yet. She knew only that he had come 3 days in a row for a child alone on foot without once thinking to arm himself against the people whose land he was crossing. "Yes," she said, "I will take you." She mounted her horse. She did not wait to see if he followed. He followed. Part 2, they found Eli on the second morning. He was exactly where Kaya had said he would be. Tucked into the east-facing notch of the canyon wall, wrapped in his own jacket, and a strip of canvas he had torn from one of the burlap sacks on his saddle, sleeping so deeply that Cole had to shake him twice before the boy's eyes opened. When Eli saw his brother's face, he made a sound that was not quite crying and not quite laughing. Cole pulled him in and held on. He did not say anything. He just held on. Kaya stood a few feet away and looked at the canyon wall. She had seen reunions before. She knew that some moments did not need witnesses, only the dignity of being looked away from. After a while, Cole stood and turned to her. Eli was on his feet, shaky but standing, with a bad scrape on his forearm and a bruise on his chin, and the hollow-eyed look of someone who had spent too long alone in the dark. "He needs water and food and a real night's sleep," Kaya said, because it was practical and because she needed something practical to say. "Yes," Cole looked at her. "How do we get him back to your camp?" "My camp is not where you take him," she said. "I know." "I meant," he stopped, started again. "Is there somewhere safe I can make a fire and let him rest for a few hours before we try to ride out?" She thought about it. She knew a place. A shallow bowl of land 1/2 mile east, sheltered on 3 sides, with enough dry wood scattered at its edges to make a fire that would not be seen from the ridgeline. She took them there. She did not plan to stay. She built the fire because Cole's hands were shaking too much from the cold and the relief of finding his brother. She boiled water in the small copper pot she carried in her saddlebag and made the kind of simple broth her mother had made for her when she was sick as a child, dried herbs and a strip of dried meat, and something that had no English name but tasted like warmth. She handed it to Eli. He drank it without speaking. His eyes were on her the whole time, not with suspicion, but with the open, unguarded look of a child who was too tired to perform anything. "Thank you," he said. His voice was rough from disuse. "Drink all of it," she said. Cole watched her from across the fire. She could feel his gaze the way you feel a change in weather, not unpleasant, just present. There was a question in it she was not ready to answer. She stayed until Eli was asleep. Then she started to stand. "Wait," Cole said. He said it the way people say things they have been holding for a while, not impulsive, but long considered. She waited. "I don't have anything to offer you," he said. "I mean that literally. My horse, my saddle, whatever cash I have on me, it's not enough, I know that. I'm not going to pretend it is. I did not do this for payment," she said. "I know you didn't. That is exactly what I'm trying to say." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You stopped. You didn't have to stop. You argued for me in front of your chief when you had no reason to. You brought me to my brother. You fed him." He paused. "I want to know why." It was a fair question. She considered it honestly. "Because your boots told me the truth," she said. "And because your brother is 14. Cole was quiet. "I have a younger sister," Kaya said. "She is 16 now. When she was 10, she got lost for 2 days in this same canyon system. My father walked every inch of it until his feet bled." She looked at the fire. "When I saw your face, I recognized what was in it." Cole did not say anything for a while. The fire crackled. Eli breathed slowly in his sleep. "What is your name?" Cole asked. She told him. He said it back carefully, getting the sound of it right, not rushing through it the way some people did with names that were unfamiliar to them. She noticed that. Over the next hour, as the fire burned lower, they talked, not about important things at first. She told him which plants were edible in the canyon system. He told her which trails were passable for horses after rain. They talked about the land the way two people talk who both love the same thing from different sides of it. Then he said, "The surveyors are going to come through this area inside of 6 months. I want you to know that. I heard it from a man in town I have no reason to disbelieve." Kaya looked at him. "I know. Your tribe knows. My uncle knows." He has been watching the signs for 2 years. She kept her voice steady. We are not unaware of what is coming. Cole looked at his hands. I'm sorry. You did not send the surveyors. No, but I live in the world that did. That was an honest thing to say. She had not expected it. They sat in silence after that, but it was not an uncomfortable silence. It was the kind that grew between two people who had just said something real to each other and were letting it settle. When the fire was nearly out, she stood and began to gather her things. How do we get back to the main trail from here? Cole asked. She drew a rough map in the dirt with a stick. She marked the landmarks he would recognize, the two split rocks, the dry creek with the bent cottonwood, the ridge that caught the morning sun on its eastern face. He studied it. He asked one question. She answered it. He nodded. I will find the trail, he said. He looked up at her. Will I see you again? The question was simple. It did not carry more weight than it needed to. She thought about it the way she thought about most things, honestly. This land is not small, she said, but it is also not that large. She mounted her horse and rode back toward camp. She did not look back, but halfway up the ridge she slowed her horse without meaning to. She sat there a moment, looking out at the canyon below at the thin thread of smoke still rising from the dying fire. Then she rode on. Part 3, she did not see him for 3 weeks. In those 3 weeks, a surveying team came through the south edge of Apache territory with their equipment and their notebooks and their carefully polite expressions that meant they had already decided what they were going to write. Her uncle sent 2 men to watch them. He sent Kaya to speak to the territorial office because she was the only one whose English was good enough to be dangerous in a room full of documents. She went. She sat across a wide oak desk from a man named Official Harlan Webb, who had never once in his life been uncomfortable, and who smiled at her in the way that men smiled when they were about to tell you something that would cost you everything and frame it as good news. She listened. She asked questions that made him hesitate. She pointed out 3 separate inconsistencies in the language of the documents he showed her and watched his smile get smaller with each one. She did not win. She never expected to win in that room. But she made the record complicated, and complicated records slowed things down, and slowing things down was sometimes the only weapon available. She rode back to camp with a headache behind both eyes and the particular kind of exhaustion that came not from the body, but from the constant effort of holding yourself very still in a room that wanted you to disappear. It was 3 days after that when she saw Cole Briggs again. She was at the trading post on the southern edge of the territory, not because she needed anything, but because the owner, a half-Navajo man named Pete Curran, usually had information about what was moving through the area. Horses, men, paper. He traded in all of it with equal detachment. She was talking to Pete when the door opened and Cole walked in. He stopped when he saw her. He did not pretend he had not. Kaya, he said. Cole Briggs, she said. Pete looked between them with no expression whatsoever, which meant he was cataloging everything. Cole walked to the counter and set down a list. Pete read it. Cole waited. Then Cole turned to Kaya and said, How is your family? It was such a normal question. Such a human thing to ask. She felt something loosen slightly in her chest. Well, she said, and your brother? Recovering, driving our mother out of her mind, which means he is fully himself again. She almost smiled. They stood at the counter of Pete Curran's trading post and talked for 20 minutes, while Pete pulled items from the shelves with the slow deliberateness of a man being paid by the hour. Cole told her about the survey team he had also seen at the south edge. He had gone out on horseback to watch them from a distance. He described their equipment, their numbers, the direction they were heading. That matches what the office told me, she said. He looked at her. You went to the territorial office? Yes. Alone. I did not need company. I needed documentation skills. He was quiet for a moment. How did that go? The way those things go? She looked at the shelf behind Pete's head. I made it slower, not stopped. Cole said nothing, but she could see him thinking. Then he said, I want to help. If there's anything I can do from my end, anyone I can talk to, any records I can pull from the county seat, I want to do it. She looked at him directly. Why? Because it is the right thing to do. Many people know what the right thing is, she said. Fewer do it. I know. He held her gaze. I'm asking you to let me try. It was not a small thing he was offering. She knew that. A white cowboy from a cattle ranch, standing in a trading post, volunteering to put himself in opposition to men with money and government papers, for a tribe that was not his and land that was not his. for reasons that would not benefit him in any practical way. She waited. "There is a man at the county seat named Alderman Prout," she said. "He processes land classification requests. 3 of the survey markers the team set last week are on land that was classified as protected under a treaty agreement from 11 years ago. If someone with standing requested access to those original classification documents, it would require Prout to produce them publicly." Cole nodded slowly. "And if those documents showed a conflict with what the survey team filed, then the filing would be incomplete. And an incomplete filing cannot be acted upon." He was quiet. "I have standing. I own land adjacent to the territory. I can file a neighboring property interest request." "I know," she said. "That is why I told you." Pete set Cole's supplies on the counter without comment. Cole paid. He loaded the supplies into his saddlebag. He turned back to Kaya. "When should I file?" "Before the end of the month," she said. "The current filing period closes on the 30th. He nodded. He picked up his bag. He paused at the door. "Will you be at the post again next week?" he asked. It was not the question he meant to ask. She could hear the one underneath it. "Possibly," she said. He left. Pete watched the door close. Then he looked at Kaya and said, in the flat tone of a man who had seen everything, "That cowboy is going to file that request." "Yes," Kaya said, "and then he is going to come back here and tell you he did it." She picked up the small item she had purchased, a roll of cord, and tucked it into her bag. "Possibly," she said again. Pete made a sound that was not quite a laugh. She walked out into the afternoon sun. Her horse was tied at the post. She stood beside it for a moment, hand on the saddle, looking south down the trail Cole had ridden. She had not asked for help. She had not needed to. He had offered it in the space between 2 sentences, like it was the most natural thing in the world. She thought about that the whole ride home. Part 4 Cole filed the request on the 27th. Kaya knew because Pete Curran sent word with a writer, the way Pete always sent word when something important moved through his information. The message was 3 words. Briggs filed it. She read it standing outside her family's shelter in the early morning, when the air still had the cold bite of night in it, and the camp was only half awake. Her younger sister Lena was behind her, combing her hair and complaining about the cold, which was what Lena did most mornings. Kaya folded the message and put it in her pocket. "What is that?" Lena asked. "Nothing important," Kaya said. Which was a lie, and Lena probably knew it was a lie. But Lena was 16 and more interested in her own hair than in whatever her older sister was carrying around. The request caused exactly the disruption Kaya had anticipated. Within a week, Alderman Prout was required to produce the 11-year-old treaty documentation. It took him 4 days longer than legally allowed, which itself became a record, which itself became a complication for the survey team's filing. The filing period closed on the 30th without the land reclassification going through. It was not a victory. It was a delay. Kaya understood the difference. But a delay meant time, and time meant more documents and more witnesses and more opportunities to make the record so complicated that the cost of pushing through it outweighed the benefit. She was explaining this to her uncle when one of the young men who kept watch on the southern trail came to find her, and said that the cowboy from the canyon was at the edge of camp asking permission to speak with her. Her uncle looked at her with the expression he used when he was deciding whether to ask a question or let things unfold. He let them unfold. She walked out to the edge of camp. Cole was there on his roan horse, hat in his hands, sitting easy in a way that meant he was genuinely at ease and not performing calm. He had learned, she noticed, to leave his hat in his hands when he came here. It was a small thing. It was not small. "The filing worked," he said when she reached him. "For now," she said. "For now," he agreed. He did not try to make it more than it was. "Prout is unhappy." "Good. He's going to try again in the next filing period." "I know." "I am already preparing the counter documentation." She looked up at him. "Thank you for filing. It could not have been comfortable." "2 of my neighbors stopped speaking to me," he said without self-pity, just as information. "I am sorry." "I'm not." He said it plainly. They weren't the kind of neighbors worth keeping. She studied his face for a moment. He was not performing nobility. He was not waiting for her to acknowledge his sacrifice. He had done a thing, and he was reporting on it, and he was sitting easy on his horse in the afternoon light like a man who had made a decision and was not revisiting it. She had met very few people like that. "Come down from your horse," she said. "I will get you water." He came down. She brought him water and a piece of flatbread from the cooking fire, because offering nothing to someone who had ridden a distance was not something her mother had ever done, and she did not intend to start. They sat at the edge of camp, not inside it but not at a remove either, in the in-between space that said something without naming it. They talked for a long time. He told her about the cattle ranch, about the season he had had, about the fence lines that needed repairing and the well that had gone partly dry, and the negotiations with the water rights holder to the north that were going worse than the Prout situation. He told her these things, the way people tell things to someone they trust, to hold them without judgment. She told him about the work she had been doing with the territorial documents, about the 3 other Apache families she had been helping prepare filings for, about the older woman in camp named Vera who had been teaching her medicinal plant preparation, and who was also, incidentally, the sharpest card player Kaya had ever met. Cole laughed at that last part, a real laugh not polished. It changed his whole face. She thought about that laugh on and off for the rest of the day. He came back the following week, and the week after that. Always with a reason, always practical, always something to discuss about the filings, or the survey team, or the water rights situation, which had unexpectedly intersected with the land dispute in a way that gave Kaya's documentation work 2 separate legal angles. But the visits got longer, and the practical reason got shorter. And somewhere in the 4th or 5th visit, the practical reason stopped being the real reason at all, even though they both still mentioned it. One afternoon in late autumn, sitting at the edge of camp with the light going gold and her sister Lena watching from a distance with theatrical nonchalance, Cole said, "I need to tell you something." Kaya waited. "The survey team is being expanded. I heard it from a man in town I have no reason to doubt. They are bringing in a second crew in the spring, this time with armed escort." The information landed like a stone in still water. "How many men?" she said. 12 in the survey crew, 6 in the escort." She was quiet. 18 men changed the nature of the problem entirely. "I am going to contact a lawyer in the state capital," Cole said. "A man named Garrett Howell. He has taken on land rights cases before. I cannot promise he will take this one, but I want to try." She looked at him. "That will cost money," she said. "Yes," he said. "Your money." He met her eyes. "Mine to spend how I see fit." She felt something she was not yet ready to name move through her chest. She had been holding it back for weeks. She had been very careful, very sensible, very practical about all of it. The visits, the work, the long conversations at the edge of camp. She had been treating it like documentation, like something that needed to be categorized correctly before she could act on it. Standing here with the gold light on his face and 18 armed men coming in the spring, she found the careful and the sensible harder to maintain. "Why are you doing this?" she said, and this time she did not mean the filing or the lawyer. She meant all of it. He was quiet for a moment. "Because I cannot look at something wrong and ride past it," he said. "I tried that once and it put my brother on his knees in a canyon." She looked away, down at the red ground. "There is also a second reason," he said. She waited. "You," he said. Just the one word, quiet and direct and without decoration. The gold light stretched long across the ground. She did not say anything for a long moment. Then she said, "The lawyer, send your letter." He nodded. He put his hat back on. He mounted his horse. At the edge of the trail, he looked back. She was still standing where he had left her. She raised one hand. He rode. Part 5 Garrett Howell arrived in the territory in early March, 2 weeks before the expanded survey crew. He was a short man with a sharp face and the methodical energy of someone who had spent 30 years in rooms where other people held all the advantages and had learned to make the rooms smaller by being smarter. He shook Kaya's hand with both of his, which told her he had worked with women before, and then he sat down and asked her to show him every document she had. She showed him. He read for 2 hours without speaking. When he looked up, his expression had changed. "This is exceptional work," he said. "It is necessary work," she said. "Yes." He set down the last page. "The treaty documentation is the center of it. If we can establish that the original land classification was legally binding under territorial law at the time of its signing, the expanded survey has no grounds. The armed escort becomes irrelevant." He looked at Cole, who was sitting in the corner. "Your neighboring property filing was smart. It created the standing we needed to get the documentation into evidence." Cole looked at Kaya. "That was her idea," he said. Howell looked between them. He made no comment. He was a lawyer. He was paid to notice things and say nothing about the ones that were not his business. The legal challenge was filed on the 14th of March. It named the treaty documentation. It named Cole's neighboring property interest. It named the procedural irregularity in Prout's delayed document production. It named the lack of proper notification to treaty-holding parties prior to survey activity. The survey crew arrived on the 28th. They were stopped at the territorial boundary by a notice of active legal challenge, served by a county officer who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. The crew's leader, a man named Decker who had the permanently irritated expression of someone whose plan kept meeting unexpected obstacles, read the notice twice. He looked at the officer. The officer shrugged. Decker looked at the boundary marker. Then he looked at the armed escort. Then he folded the notice and said, "We wait for legal clarification." They waited. The case took 4 months. In those 4 months, Kaya and Howell and Cole assembled a record that was, in Howell's words, about as airtight as anything he had worked on in 3 decades. The treaty language was unambiguous once you read it, without the overlay of documents that had been filed on top of it over the years, documents that had been designed to obscure rather than clarify. The territorial court ruled in favor of the tribe on the primary question. The survey expansion was blocked. The original boundary held. It was not everything. It never was. The world outside the courtroom did not stop moving simply because a court had ruled. There would be more survey teams and more Prout-like officials and more seasons of this same exhausting work. But the land was still the land. The day the ruling came through, Kaya was sitting with her uncle in front of his shelter. He read the document slowly. He set it down on his knee. "The Cowboy's lawyer," he said, "and the Cowboy's filing," she said, "and 11 years of treaty documentation that was already there waiting for someone to read it correctly." Her uncle looked at her for a long moment. He had known her since she was born. He had watched her mother teach her and her father walk the canyon with her and her sister follow her around the camp like a small, persistent shadow. He knew what she looked like when she was carrying something carefully. "The Cowboy comes here often," her uncle said. "He has reasons to come," she said. "Yes," her uncle said. "I have noticed the reasons." She looked at her hands. "He is a decent man," her uncle said. "Decency is not as common as it should be." It was as close to a blessing as her uncle gave anything. She understood it. That evening, Cole came to camp. He had heard about the ruling from Howell. He had ridden the full 2 days without stopping more than necessary. He looked like it. He also looked like a man who had run towards something instead of away from it. They walked to the east edge of camp, where the canyon opened out below, and the last of the day's light sat on the rock walls like something poured and cooling. They stood there for a while without speaking. Then Kaya said, "The tribe's ceremonial turquoise collection, the 7 pieces in my uncle's keeping, do you know what they are worth?" Cole looked at her. "No, more than the Prout filing, more than the lawyer's fee. More than most things my uncle owns." She kept her eyes on the canyon. "When I first went to my uncle and told him about you and the filing and what it would require, he offered them, without being asked. He said if it would buy the outcome, he would spend them." Cole was quiet. "He did not have to spend them," she said. "Howell's fee was manageable and you covered the rest." She paused. "But the offer was made. That is what I want you to understand. He would have traded the thing our family has held for 4 generations to buy the time we needed." "I know what that means," Cole said. "I know you do." She turned to look at him. "And now I need to ask you for something different." He waited. She did not look away. "We traded everything for freedom," she said. "For the land. For the right to stay on the ground that was already ours." Her voice was steady. "I need you to understand that is the first thing and it will always be the first thing. This land and these people will always come first." "I understand that," he said. "If you are going to be here," she said, "you are going to be here for what that means. The hard seasons, the filings, the years that will come after this one. You do not get the easy version." He looked at her for a long time. "I already chose the hard version," he said. "I chose it when I rode out here alone with a shovel and 2 days of water to look for Eli. I chose it when I filed the request. I chose it every week I came back." He paused. "I am not here for the easy version of anything." The canyon below held the last of the light. "I know," she said, quietly, just that. She reached out and set her hand over his where it rested on the rock, not a large gesture, the smallest possible one, but deliberate. He turned his hand over and held hers. They stood there while the light left the canyon walls and the first stars came through, and the camp behind them settled into its evening sounds. She had traded nothing. He had given freely. And somewhere between those two truths, they had built something that did not yet have a name but did not need one. The land was still the land, and they were still standing on it, together.